Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for being here this afternoon. And my name is Bill Purcell. I'm one of the associate directors here at the Center for Social Concerns. I'm the associate director for Catholic Social Tradition. And the theme for the center this year, we always do a CST theme, has been Care of All Creation, of course, based on Laudato Si. So it was an easy theme to put together. And with that, we've been having many different events and with many of you different partners here in this room. And this was one of the keystone events that we wanted to build on this year with welcoming Cardinal Rodríguez and asking him early on. So being so involved with Laudato Si and being an expert on it, we thought it would be an important part to add to the year's theme and hearing from the leader in the church. Just so you know, those on Twitter, we're using hashtag #ClimateCardinal for the social media because we've been doing this with, we did in coordination with Georgetown University, our partners at Georgetown, and our partners at Fordham and here at Notre Dame, three of us working together, is kind of doing a tour of how do we lift this up so that Laudato Si, again, is something to act on and how do we continue that strength. And we thought by working with university partners would be a great way to do that. Just so you know that this event is being taped, so if you know someone that's a friend of yours and they didn't see it, we'll put up the link on the Center for Social Concerns website, usually within a couple days, and so we'll put that so you can find it. I do want to thank our co-sponsors. Again, we have a number of folks who helped us to have this event take place. One is a group that you maybe have never heard of. It's called Green Faith, which is Interfaith Partners for the Environment. They're an interfaith group that work on the environment, and they were very excited with Laudato Si. And so they were some of the ones that worked and coordinated with Georgetown, Fordham, and here at the University of Notre Dame so that with Green Faith we could bring the Cardinal here to the United States. I also want to thank Father Bill and his staff from the Office for Mission Engagement and Church Affairs. Chuck Lamphere and Marianne have been very supportive, again, with this event. Again, also the Snipe Museum, following, just so you know, right after this event, I would encourage you to go. There's a reception right in the main lobby, but right next to that, there's actually a display on Narco City on Honduras. There's a couple different displays, and that was one of the reasons we thought it would be great to be here at the Snipe Museum, so you could actually see the displays upstairs in the photography and some of the issues that are occurring in Honduras and their people. We also want to thank the Office of Sustainability that's been a great partner throughout this year, as well as the minor in sustainability. Actually, this morning, the Cardinal spoke to the intro sustainability class, which was very enjoyable for us today. One very last thing is in the back, we're working with Catholic Relief Services. They're actually doing action on climate change and how to act within your parishes, within your church, on campuses. And so Jen in the back actually has set up a table so that you can sign up and get more information about how to be involved with Catholic Relief Services, because as we know, it's often those who do the least to cause climate change are those impacted the most, and that's the global poor. And I'm going to turn things over to Father Paul Coleman, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Social Concerns. Father Paul is also tenured theology here in World Religions World Church, specializing in African religions, who's been a great director for us for the last 3.5 years. And so we're going to kind of do like a dialogue with the Cardinal. We thought would be one of the more interesting things. Instead of a straight lecture, is how do we kind of have a discussion with him on these issues of both Laudato Si, but also he literally just came from Rome from the Synod that just finished. So with that, let us welcome Cardinal Rodríguez and Father Paul Coleman.
Thank you very much, Bill, and I know I speak for all of us in extending our gratitude to Cardinal Óscar Rodríguez for joining us. Cardinal Rodríguez is the Archbishop of Tegucigalpa, Honduras. He's past president of CELAM, the Council of the Bishops of Latin America. He served in that role from 1995 to 1999. He was also president of Caritas Internationalis, the network of Catholic Relief Services type agencies across the world. Was.
Until May,
Previously.
last May.
Yeah. And now Cardinal Tagle has that position.
Yes.
As Bill suggests, Cardinal Rodríguez is the perfect person for the theme that the Center for Social Concerns has chosen to guide its programming this year, Care of All Creation, deriving particularly from Laudato Si. When Pope Francis was elected, he gave 3 clear priorities for his pontificate: engagement on behalf of peace, on behalf of the poor, and on behalf of the environment. And in Laudato Si, we see him at work linking very clearly those 3 priorities, so that he makes very clear in that document that the cry of the earth is the cry of the poor, and vice versa. Of course, Cardinal Rodríguez was part and parcel of the process leading up to Laudato Si, and as coordinator of the Council of Cardinals that Pope Francis chose to guide him as he leads our church, he has insight into the ways that group of church leaders and Pope Francis himself has come to some of the convictions that guide his leadership. Just so you know, a few things about Cardinal Rodríguez that might be lesser known. He himself was once a teacher of chemistry, physics, and biology in a Salesian school, probably. He is a member of the Society of Don Bosco, the Salesians. So he knows something about science. It's not completely foreign. He doesn't begin a talk like this like so many politicians. I'm not a scientist, as a way to decry the responsibility. He's also a man of other gifts, a concert pianist, and a previous visit to the Center for Social Concerns some years ago, he played the saxophone in the coffee house in the building preceding the current Geddes Hall. We see no such instrument tucked behind the curtain, but you never know. So on behalf of all of us, most welcome here, Cardinal Rodríguez. Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm so happy to be with you because I am a Notre Damean.
We gave Cardinal Rodríguez an honorary degree some years ago, about a dozen years ago, and so we're glad to return as an alum to the university.
And as well because here I have so wonderful friends. I want to mention Father Pelton, a great friend of Central America and especially of the cause of the Blessed Romero. He has been fighting. He's a historian of Medellin, Puebla, Santo Domingo, and also Aparecida. He has been always committed. Thank you, Father Bob. And of course, Father Gustavo, an all-time friend and an honor for Latin America. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And as a member of the theology department's faculty, I must say it's an honor to have both of them as my colleagues in the department. And Father Bob Pelton was instrumental in founding the Department of Theology about 48 years ago. Just so you know, the process moving from religious studies and catechism to the theological engagement we now seek to have all of our students to have as their education here.
Very good.
So first question. Unlike many of the other electors of then Cardinal Bergoglio to the papacy, you would have known him for some time, particularly through the work with CELAM in Latin America. What's it like to have someone you once knew in that kind of a position now in the position he now holds?
I will tell you, it's a big blessing. And not only for me, because, you know, most of us knew him very well, especially in the conference of Aparecida, where he was the chief redactor. And I was member of that commission, so we spent hours and hours discussing and writing. And of course, it was a long time dream we had when we will have a pope from Latin America. The time came, and the time came with a lot of hope, because I believe this is a man that gave hope again to the church in every aspect.
Thank you. So why do you think Pope Francis, what in his experience prompted him to make Laudato Si his second encyclical, but the first one that's really fully his own work?
Was a four hands first encyclical. It was part of Benedict and part of himself. He didn't want the work that Benedict had been doing to get lost. So he took that and said, okay, I will put some of my own feelings and thoughts, but as he says, it's like in piano we play four hands. It's beautiful. Okay, but from the very beginning, we had a lot of concern in the Conference of Medellin, where Father Gustavo was one of the main theologians, I would say. And that was, at that time, concern about many problems of the environment. Puebla was more precise. And we talk especially about the abuses of the big timber companies destroying the forests, especially in Brazil. But in Aparecida, it was clear about the Antarctic region. And since the Pope comes from the very south of Latin America, he was conscious of that. And so we were discussing, okay, there was concern about the forest in Brazil, the lungs of many of our countries, concerns about the Antarctic and the North Pole, and all the climate changes. But not only concentrated in climate change, it's very important to know that the encyclical letter is global, not only taking that problem, because there are other problems related to the environment, and especially human ecology, because when there was critics of the encyclical letter saying, what does the Pope knows about science, about environment, well, in this letter, more than 200 experts were consulted and and some of them gave written papers, especially to the second chapter. When you will read it, you will see, I assume that all of you read it already. If you didn't, do it as soon as possible, because otherwise it's not possible to discuss about this. This is a problem that many people have the opinion only of a headline in a press or in a magazine. But of course there is a big effort to read it, but unless you do it, you do not catch the real spirit that is there. And the Pope started with a very interesting thing. You know that when we have a house, we need maintenance to the house. Changing the roof, changing some wires, or trying to repair the water pipes that with time, especially with the beautiful climate you have here, November is an exception because we don't have snow, but okay, the pipes many times are in bad shape. Okay, the house needs maintenance. What about our common home, which is the earth? And this is a wonderful idea he got from St. Francis. When the Pope was elected and he chose the name Francis, I said, wow, a Jesuit Franciscan or a Franciscan Jesuit. But it's true. He was so concerned and continues to be like this. And so we were expecting this encyclical letter. It took time. He started immediately after Evangelii Gaudium. He was concentrated in this. And I remember in February last year, I asked him about the encyclical, and he said, oh, I have it here, and show me like this, a package like this of documents. Said, but it needs to continue working in it. He wanted to publish it very much in advance of the summit that is taking place in Paris next December. Because usually, as I said before, these summits lead nowhere unless there is a political will of China and the United States of doing something concrete. That will be only paper and speeches. But I am convinced the time has come, and this next summit has to be better. And that's the reason why this encyclical letter is so important. Not only for Paris, it's like a pastoral plan for the future, because it is engaging each one of us and the single ones of us. Children, teenagers, young adults, and old people. Everyone, every citizen of this world has to be committed to take care of our common home. This is the main spirit, I believe.
Thank you, and thanks for reminding us of the particular roots in his Latin American experience as a pastor, and also the proximity to Antarctica. I hadn't thought about that before, but the tip of Argentina is where voyages to Antarctica head from very often. Quick question about the reception of Laudato Si from your perspective and the perspective of the global church, and also kind of the family of nations. We're a little bit familiar about how the United States has responded if we read our newspapers and listen to our politicians, but there's a whole lot of other countries in the world who listen and carefully to things that come from the Vatican. They like Laudato Si. So what's your sense, maybe just giving us some places where the encyclicals have been very well received, and places where you're concerned about a rather unwelcoming reception, perhaps, or indifference?
Well, you know, this is a problem with documents because, okay, most of the population of the world now knows how to read and to write, but they don't read and they don't write. And so this is a problem. We have to induce the reading. Now it's better to just to take a fast place on the computer and, okay, I am informed. To take seriously a document and to go inside it is not easy. But this is our mission in the next following month. We have to commit ourselves to make the encyclical letter known. This morning I was telling that the only radioactive material we are going to tolerate is science and wisdom and the Word of God. This university was chosen to be radioactive, not with radiation that kills, but with ideas and with thinking. There is very little people thinking nowadays. There are others who would like to think by the majority. And so you see that, politically speaking, what kind of propaganda we have by political candidates. Emotions, some superficial ideas. Yes, I am going to build a wall between the border from here to the other. And the other answer, okay, do it. We will have El Chapo Guzman to make the tunnel. This is nonsense, my goodness. It's necessary nowadays to spread the thinking. And the only way you can put in practice this encyclical letter is reading it in totality and trying to spread it. I can tell you a beautiful experience we got. I had the idea to just put some words in a copy of the encyclical and send it to the Minister of Environment of my country. I was surprised when this man asked me for 500 copies of the encyclical letter because he wanted to give it to all his collaborators in the ministry. And I said, this is quite good. Then I had the idea on the 1st of September, the day of prayer for the environment, to invite the government. And most of them came. They came for a mass. They came to pray, but they came to listen. That is necessary to take seriously the care of our common home, unless we want to inherit. This is one of the main topics of the encyclical letter. We need to deliver to the future generations a better home than the one we received. In the book of Genesis, you see that the Creator gave us a garden. What are we going to give to the future generations? A desert? But it's the big question. So the reception has been very, very different, but in general has been very well received. You may know that there was a draft of the encyclical letter published some days before. Okay. They say that there was powerful petrol companies who paid somebody to steal. They use, a euphemism, saying it was filtered. No, sir. It was stolen. That's the right word. It's not filtration. There was stolen. But anyhow, in general, it was very well received.
Good. Glad to hear that. I appreciate you sort of bringing us to the topic of justice understood in an intergenerational way. In some ways, the ecological conversion that is called for in the encyclical is one that's very mindful of justice understood in an intergenerational way. I want to turn quickly to another recent event that has to do with generations of persons as well, the Synod of the Family. Because the family is certainly a social locus where lots of values are transmitted from one generation to the next. So on the face of it, such events might seem discontinuous with one another. But understood from that perspective, there's a deep continuity between them, since families are places where values are transmitted from one generation to the next. A little bit of words about the Synod, perhaps moments at that Synod where Laudato Si itself was invoked, mindful of some connections like this or others that were possible.
Yes, there is a lot of connection, because in the 6th chapter of Laudato Si, you find the spirituality of all this work and goes directly to the families. Because in the family is where you learn values and where you have to be educated, and parents have to educate their children the respect of creation. For us, it's very important because many times in the countryside, they say, oh, we need wood for the stove. Okay, you please, kid, go and cut that tree. That's not good. You start looking to the forest as your enemies and not as your allies. So it's necessary to change also the habits and the way to educate them. And family is decisive for this. In many cultures, especially the Aboriginous cultures in Latin America, there is a love for the Mother Earth. And this is a wonderful value. Mother Earth is where we get food, where we get the ways to survive, where we get everything. And so we respect Mother Earth and we try to honor Mother Earth. These are values that are not in other cultures. So there is work for an inculturation and sharing the values of different cultures by spreading Laudato Si and reflecting and knowing Laudato Si to put it in practice. Of course, we need an ecological conversion. I was not in the Synod of 2011 of the new evangelization. I was not there. I was tired of synods. But then, but then, what I heard made me a little sad, because in Aparecida we spoke about the pastoral conversion. And I learned that in that synod was a big discussion saying that it was not possible to talk about pastoral conversion because the conversion was personal and could not be used in that sense. What do they say now when Pope says in Laudato Si is necessary an ecological conversion? Of course it's needed, because conversion means to change direction of your road, of your way, and we need to change. This ecological conversion leads us, for instance, to create new habits of consuming, for instance. Well, in some cultures, such as here, it's been a long time when they started to recycle, for example. This is a concrete way of ecological conversion, of recycling, of separating trash, disposing of trash and everything. This is part, but it's a long way still to go, because it's not only of recycling or disposing, sparing energy. This is another subject. And the Pope is very clear in this subject. He says, okay, we are blessed when we have heating. In my country, we have natural heating, sometimes too much. But of course, it's good to have heating, but instead of using it full power the whole day, why don't we try to spare a little, he says, and using maybe a little more heavy clothing and trying to, this is a new way of ecological conversion. If I need air conditioning because the summer is very, very warm, okay, I can use it only to sleep. And in the rest of the day, etc. There is a lot of new ways of trying to implement this ecological conversion, but we need especially in industries. This is really, and I believe it will be one of the most difficult pages, trying to convince entrepreneurs and industries that everything has a limit, because we are creatures. We are not creators. And we have our own personal limits, our own personal limits in our way of being citizens. We have limits in our life, and we have limits in growth as well. We cannot think of unlimited growing, for instance, in economy, because when you have this, is at the cost of impoverishing others. And this is also a subject that we can take out from Laudato Si. This is conversion, ecological conversion.
Thanks so much. One final question about Laudato Si before we turn to the Synod on the Family, and maybe some questions about your role in the Council of the Cardinals who advised the Pope. Generally, one critique of Laudato Si that would come from the more or less right of the US political spectrum would be it's a little bit unrealistic, and some of the concrete critiques focus on, for instance, the dispute the Pope has with the strategy of carbon offsets as a strategy, as a way to lessen carbon in the atmosphere. From the left, another kind of critique of Laudato Si is that it doesn't address population growth courageously enough. I mean, in general, the response has been, this is not a policy document so much as a spiritual invitation, one that is made in a spirit of dialogue. Would you want to make a little bit more concrete the Pope's reluctance to make the kinds of suggestions that might have satisfied people on the right and people on the left.
Yes, because many people were expecting that the Pope would say which are the wrong politics in the world, and asking, what is the politics of the Pope? An encyclical letter is not a policy paper. This is clear. It's a letter written by the father of the family on the problems of every day. Sorry. We could say that is taking seriously what the ordinary people live every day. So, the urgent challenge is to protect our common home. The urgent challenge to protect our common home includes a concern to bring the whole human family together to seek a sustainable and integral development, for we know that things can change. This is beautiful. It's a word of hope. Many were saying that the encyclical letter is too negative, too pessimistic. No, look at what he said. We know that things can change. So it's an invitation to change. Of course, when you are placed in an ideological situation, is the encyclical an ideology? No. What's the definition of ideology? Is a sectorial definition of reality from a side of some interests. That is why we have different ideologies. The encyclical is not ideological because it tries to be global. And this is the difference. Okay, for those who say that is not talking sufficiently about population, wow, they didn't read it yet. Because when we go to see what he says about it's necessary that parents take the responsibility of transmit life, and once he used a phrase that came not in the encyclical letter, but in an occasion of a passage, he said something that was offending some people, but you have to understand Pope Francis, sometimes he's so spontaneous. He said, we are not rabbits. Of course, it's a little tough, but it's very well making the description. We have to be responsible in transmitting life. We cannot have children without responsibility, as in some places. More clearly, cannot be, because the encyclical letter was not about humane vitae. It's a different thing. But we have to understand that. On the other hand, the Pope is not saying how industries have to go. He is just putting, as I told you, experts were working, especially in the second chapter. I recall inviting one of the outstanding experts of the UN is a professor from Germany, Ottmar Edenhofer. And he told me, I would like to talk to the Pope. I said, yes. And I told the Pope, and he said, oh my goodness, my agenda today is very, very plenty, full. But tell him to come at 3 o'clock. I will sacrifice my siesta. And he did it. And this man was 1 hour and a half with the Pope. And of course, this is not about, but it's necessary to the. We cannot act protecting interests of groups. Of course, I understand the coal industry, mining industry, petrol industry have to defend their own interests, but we cannot pretend that they have 100% truth. Okay? This is why in the encyclical letter and in the pastoral attitude of Pope Francis, dialogue is a key word. Dialogue. he wants to start a dialogue with all the sectors in order to find the best way of achieving better care for our common home.
Thanks so much. So to turn to the Synod on the Family, you were able to participate in that. And again, we've heard some of the news. We await a final statement from that Synod, which should arise over the next few months, I would suppose.
Well, I'm not quite sure about that, because when we have the Relatio Finalis approved, vote number by number, and then published, could be, but I'm not sure about that. Because the Pope had the intention, everybody has the right to know what happens inside. And that's what he did. You know, in the past, in the other synods, what do the people had to do was making propositions to the Pope that the Synod will say this and that, proposition number 57. Who vote in favor? Who vote against? Who vote juxta morum? And so the result of a Synod was a booklet with some propositions. Then the Secretariat took all the materials, lineamenta, instrumentum laboris, all the interventions in the aula, and all the propositions, and said, okay, and now what do we do with this? Start working, trying to make nets and things, and finally come out after 1 year of work with a document that was given to the Pope, and he was working that document with his own theologians or counselors, and then the document came out. The Pope changed the methodology now. And so he wants, okay, you want a Synod? Let's go to the Synod. You want to know what's going on? Every day it is public. And you want to know what are the results? Here you have it. So now the work is of the pastors to put in practice what is there. 93 numbers. And to know the Synod, you have to read if you want to know. Because the majority, and it happens that I have it here, so I will give you some examples. Because for the majority of people, the results of the Synod were just a failure, because, you know, there was nothing about the marriage of the same-sex couples, and it was nothing about the communion for the divorced. And that was all. No, my dear, it was very, very good. And there is another document that is necessary to have in consideration to understand the depth of the Synod, the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the institution of the Synod, with two very important speeches, Cardinal Schönborn's speech and the Pope's speech, which is clear about two big principles of Vatican II, collegiality and synodality. And if we want to go deep into the Synod, it's necessary to know these documents. So I encourage you. I know you have a lot of things to read, but please do this, read this. I am having trouble locating, but I want to talk to you about this, because where is it? My goodness. Relatio Finalis, here it is. Just to give you an example of the richness of this Synod, you know, because when people, there was 3 parts in the Synod with the methodology we have been using since Medellin. to see, to judge, and to act. So the methodology changed because at the beginning, in the old synods, there was 10 days of listening and sleeping. Yes, because when you have been listening after maybe 3 or 4 days, they were repeating the same things. 8 minutes each, and talk and talk and talk and talk. 10 days. Then you went to the Circuli Minores to make those propositions. And then you vote, you gave it to the Pope. See ya. Now the methodology changed. Now, the first part, of course, there was interventions, but 3 minutes each. So if you have to say something, you're not going to sing to the chorus. You are going to say the idea, the main idea, in 3 minutes. Then, after 2 days of listening, we went 3 days to the small circles. And that is, I believe, the best methodology, because in the circles, in the groups, is where you really put the questions and just try to make a redaction. Then another 3 days of listening for the second part, and groups. Then the third part, and groups. I have to tell you, this is one of the best synods for me, because the others were only routine. These were touching the real problems. For instance, yes, how do you think talking about family and inclusion in society, talking about the problems of so-called third age that many times are not considered, the problems of widows and widowers, is this important for the Synod? Of course, these are people of God. About death and the last part of life, when people is afraid of talking about this and is only thinking in dying with dignity. Parentheses, suicide, euthanasia. These are real problems of the family. Persons with special needs, in the past, handicapped people. So, persons that are not married, migrants, fugitives, people persecuted, and the impact in families. Is it important? Of course, we live that every day. Some particular challenges. The children, women, of course. Men, the young, were in the category of family and children, for instance. Only considering the children of divorced couples that are the direct victims, like ping pong balls. This week with the former father. The other week in the other table, ping pong, with the mother. Or what happens with the fiancé of your father, or the new friend of your mother. And children, where do you live? I don't know. 1 week in this house, 1 week in the other one. And even a small plant needs a pot to have roots. And these are important problems to the family. And we were talking about all of this. What do you think about, not only this inclusion in the society, the socio-economical problems for the modern family, how to work with the theme of loneliness. which is very important for families. Equality, economic equality, poverty and exclusion for families, and of course, ecology and family. It is discussed in the Relatio Finalis. So maybe you start to have appetite to read the Relatio Finalis. It's worth. It's not only what the press did. Okay, so no, it's good for good reflections, and especially in the act, because in the second part is the family in the plan of God. Of course, all the light that comes from the Holy Scripture to the theme of family, which is not only some quotations of the Bible, it's just a full mentality. And then family in the magisterium of the church, especially the recent magisterium, such as Vatican II, Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict, and Francis. A very important magisterium. Then the family and the Christian doctrine of matrimony in order to the creation, in order to the sacramentality, which is something that is still needs more reflection and study. An example. Of course, matrimony celebrated according to the canonical form is a sacrament. What happens when the persons who are going to be married do not have faith? Can you have a sacrament without faith? The question. So you know that this is not only indissolubility or canonical form, it's more complicated. Once I was invited to bless the marriage of a couple of friends in Madrid. I said, okay, you do the preparation, you go to the parish, you have all the documents, and when I can pass, I will bless your marriage. Okay. Then I was asking them, how is the preparation? And the couple said to me, horrible, awful. We were 5 couples that were invited to go 3 weekends to listen to some boring conferences, and of the 5 couples, only 2 of us were people of faith. The others went for different motivations. The other 3 couples didn't believe, but they wanted to be married by the church because otherwise the father-in-law will not allow the girl to be married. So these are real problems that is necessary to reflect on that. It's not only a matter of a theology that is in the clouds away from. How can we start like a process of maturing in your faith and in your Christian life to arrive with a certain amount of maturity to the decision of your life, as we, for the priesthood, prepare long time our final decision to say yes to the Lord? What about marriage? Is the most important for most of the laymen and women decision in life, and many times is improvised in a terrible way. Improvising the best decision of your life that will commit your whole life. It means that problems are very big. There is beautiful reflections about the new preparation of marriage. And there is a wish to have family and marriage as a transversal dimension of pastoral. Everything converging to that. I could have been speaking the whole night, but I recommend you to read, please. Read this. I don't think it has been published in other languages. It's not only in Italian right now, but it will be very soon. Very soon will be published. And it's necessary to read it, to reflect on it, and to put it in practice, especially in the pastoral side. And in the university, of course, because you have theology courses. Theology is not another subject only to give an exam or to put it in the schedule. It's something very important for life. And theology of life and theology of marriage is very important because most of you are going to have families and to have marriages. It's very important.
Thank you very much. It's really good to hear about the wide range of subjects touched upon at the Synod. And I think you're right that not all of us would have been aware of that range if we followed the news coverage of the events, even leading up to it. Just a quick question about the kinds of things that would have been unmistakable if you were present at the Synod, that would have reminded you about the diversity of the church, the different things that might have come from Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, North America, Australia, and Oceania. Those inevitably create tensions to having a single pastoral response on these kinds of issues. How do you see the church moving forward with something like a consensus, given the very different pastoral instincts that leaders from those parts of the church might have with regard to the issues of the Synod of the Family?
This was a very important task in the Synod, and the commission that of redaction of these Relatio Finalis voted unanimously for this redaction. There were 10 people in that commission. Okay. And then the Pope wanted each single subject, single number, voted. And they were approved with 2/3 of the votes. And I have the numbers here as well. And I can tell you that most of the numbers got more than, let me tell you, okay, what happens here? More than 250 votes. It means, in general, there was a great unanimity. Even if all the different cultures, of course, we cannot compare the culture of Africa with the culture, I have it here, let me see, with the culture of Asia, with the culture of Europe, with the culture of the United States. We were 265 voters in that day, 265. 177 was the majority of 2/3. Okay, most of the proposition, I have the votes here, 260, 257, 255, etc. Only one got 178. Only one of the 93. It means in the final decision, the majority were in agreement. Of course, the differences are enormous. You could listen to Africa, where, for instance, gay culture has death penalty in some countries. In other countries where they still have polygamy. Other countries that the situation of widows is horrible because they are considered like the woman of everyone. It's difficult, terribly difficult. But in the middle of that, how to take the good news, the happy news of the gospel of marriage and family is a big challenge. It's a big challenge because these people live under oppression. For instance, when they have this practice of mutilating
Female genital mutilation.
yes, is terrible. How to evangelize this culture to abandon these practices that are performed many times by the same parents. It's terrible. One continent. Other continents, such a difficult and different parts. Mixed marriages. The situation with Islam, for instance, which is very complicated. And the minority of Christian, especially Christian girls, who are married to a Muslim and will be submitted to a real and slavery, treated like slaves. This is really difficult. But in the Synod, regardless of the different ways of thinking, of course, when we heard some interventions of the former Iron Curtain participants, of course, they still have the mentality of oppression and fear, and of course, nothing has to change because it was times of defending their own positions, and they continue with that. Not easy to dialogue with them, to enter in dialogue, just to consider the possibility of another option in front of certain problems. But this is also the richness of our church, that is universal, that is Catholic. And even with all the differences, I believe in the Spirit, in the Holy Spirit, that is not in holidays and nor sleeping a long siesta. Is very active and working among the church.
Thank you very much. One last sort of set of questions that have to do with your participation in the Council of Cardinals that Pope Francis has called. I'd just like to hear a little bit about what that has meant to you as a spiritual leader who comes from a particular place and is now asked in some ways to embody the Church Universal as an advisor with your fellow cardinals, each of whom also relies on many others and lots of different experiences. What's that been like for you personally?
You know, the idea came from the pre-conclave meetings. There was sadness before the conclave because it was the first time that a pope ever resigned. And we were sad because we saw the sadness of Pope Benedict. Attention, this was not an improvised decision. Later I knew that when he ended his visit to Mexico and Cuba, you remember it was around April, I think, of 2012, when he came back to Rome, he said to the Secretary of State, I cannot go on. I don't have enough strength to continue. So I will resign. But don't say a word to nobody because I have to mature my decision. And it was a miracle that nobody knew and not even suspect about that. Because now they joke about the pontifical secret, you know? And they say, what is pontifical secret? It's a secret that everybody knows but the Pope. Unfortunately, this is the situation. And so, nobody knew about that. So, he was in an ordinary consistory, those who are called to approve the canonization of saints. And after that consistory, he starts reading his speech in Latin, saying that he was presenting his resignation effective at the ending of February 2013. I was in my country and we were in the meeting of our bishops' conference. When I got those news, I said, my goodness, what is coming now to our church. There was a lot of sadness. And later on, we knew that, of course, the Pope was so sad because he couldn't trust his own collaborators. The problem of WikiLeaks was decisive in this. His private documents in his own room were just unsolved. The man who wrote the new book that was published today, Nuzzi, he says, I was reading the prologue today, and he said, he talks about this butler. He says the name, and he says that he gave him the documents. How do you like that? So the Pope was so sad. And then, in the pre-conclave decisions, there was some petitions of some of the cardinals saying the Pope was not well informed. There was a filter in the nunciatures, and there was a filter in the Secretary of State, and so information was not going directly to the Pope. He was informed of what the nuncios or the Secretary of State or the personnel wanted to give to him. Many things he never knew. Why is not possible to have a commission from the grassroots, from the bottom, from the continents, let's say one cardinal from every continent, to be like a council for the Pope? That was a proposition in the pre-conclave meetings. After the conclave, when the Pope was elected, he was elected on March 13th. 17th was his first Sunday. He called me and said, what are you doing after the Angelus? Whatever you say, Holy Father. Come. He said, come to have lunch with me. I went. We were only the two of us. And he said, listen, I want to make a commission of cardinals with this. He had all the names in his mind and said, would you dare to lead it? Okay, I said. That was the origin of this. But I can tell you, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. Because this is part of the Catholicity of the Church. It's not only that, okay, it's like a president who would like to listen only his ministers, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Health, and not listening to the people. And so we have this difficult task, but at the same time, very rewarding task to take the feeling of the people to the Holy Father. And he listens. He is among us like another member. Every single meeting we have, he is with us. And he's listening most of the time, sometimes questioning us, but always with us. It's a big, big sacrifice. Morning, evenings, and nights, many times, listening, and discussing and presenting subjects. And what do they think in Africa? For instance, he asks the African cardinal, what is the situation in the United States? Many beautiful things came out, such as this commission that is led by Cardinal O'Malley about the abuses. It was very courageous, and it's working okay, let me tell you, working very well. The first reform was the reform of economy. That was a mess, a big mess. And now it's going much better and will be much better. So for me, it's a blessing and is a way of knowing and loving my church every day more and more.
That's wonderful to hear. You've now been to 2 U.S. universities, and this is your third. We're so glad you've come to Notre Dame. Quick question about what you think Catholic universities have to give to the church in particular in this pontificate. Francis, his operative word in so much of his writing is dialogue. And of course, universities ideally ought to be places of rich conversation where pursuit of the truth knows no bounds. That can make some people uncomfortable, but it also is, in some ways, the rules of the game. What kind of things do you think the Catholic universities have to give in this pontificate in particular?
A lot. You know, I come from the world of education. My first vocation before priesthood was to be a teacher. Since I was a little kid, I wanted to teach. And I recall being a child teaching to my colleagues, kids, boys, little boys, teaching everything. How to sing, for instance. I loved to sing since I was very little. And teaching them songs, teaching them jokes as well. It was beautiful. Okay. So, I think that universities are the best and the most important place for education. High school is okay, but it's not decisive. University is decisive. Here is the place where big decisions in life are taken. And so, the university has a role of being pontifexes, building bridges. And we need the university to be building bridges with society, because especially my concern is the vacuum in the world of good politicians. And many times we see politics as something dirty where Christians must not enter. And that is why we have the politics we have. Because it's necessary. I am not talking about proselytism. No, this is wrong. And evangelization is not proselytism. It's sharing what we have, sharing the truth, sharing the values that we have with others. I am not trying to convince anybody to follow Christ, but I share with other persons, why do I follow Christ? Why do I love Christ? Why do I commit my life to Christ? But in a way of sharing, not trying to convince. University has this important task. It's necessary to take to the world that doesn't think thoughts. Many people, I say, uses the head only to carry the hair. Not to think. Yes, we find a lot of people that do not think. And elections are one of the signs of this.
Now you're touching on something that makes many of us who observe our elections somewhat sad.
It's necessary to vote in conscience. It's one of the most decisive acts of democracy, because changes will not come from violence or armed revolutions. Changes will come through democracy and politics. But it's necessary to be educated to that and to be educated to think. And this is the main role of university. I love the universities and I trust the universities a lot. And in the Congregation of Education in the Vatican, this is the most important sector, the universities.
Well, I know I speak on behalf of members of this university community and some of our other guests who are here, and being very grateful that you've graced us with your presence this afternoon. Besides thanking the Synod Museum for hosting us and our other sponsors, and inviting you once again, as Bill Purcell did, to the reception in the lobby, I'd like to, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for joining us, for being so forthcoming and frank, and for inspiring us by your own witness. So you've given a good account of the hope that is in you, so that we can give good accounts of the hope that is in us here at a university like Notre Dame. Thank you very much, Cardinal Rodríguez.
God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. I will tell the Holy Father that he's beloved here in this university
Yes.
and that this is for him. Thank you.
We have 3 minutes, and I heard a rumor that you wrote a song about the Pope.
It's not about the Pope, it's about Evangelii Gaudium.
Oh, about the Pope's
La
apostolic letter.
alegría del Evangelio. Would you like to listen to it?
Yes.
Even if it is in Spanish, but
Qué bueno.
la alegría del Evangelio nos invita a la misión y con el Papa Francisco misericordia y bendición. La alegría del Evangelio nos invita a la misión y con el Papa Francisco misericordia y bendición. La pobreza nos agobia, pero tiene solución. Solidarios y fraternos, compartir y primerear, dinamismo de salida, con Abraham y con Moisés. Con Jesús siempre se nace y renace la alegría del Evangelio nos invita a la misión y con el Papa Francisco misericordia y bendición. La alegría del Evangelio nos invita a la misión y con el Papa Francisco misericordia y bendición.
Thank you very much.
God bless.
That's wonderful.
God bless.
Thank you very much.